Welcome to Universal Basic Calci, guys. All right, Mike, have you seen any movies since our discussion with Dan on Tuesday night?
No, just some more SpongeBob.
Hmm.
Mm,
Okay. We're joined by our producer, Amir Reslov. Amir, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Have you seen any of the Best Picture nominees?
None, actually.
Hmm.
Bumped yourself. Been watching a lot of SpongeBob.
Good, good. Actually, I covered Begonia since we did the podcast, which is terrific. Anyway.
Nice. So, what's going on with your DHS Pet 7?
Okay, I am out. Um, but I kind of wanted to stay in, and actually I've left a little money on the table so far because my bets would have progressed. But I think there's I want to explain the reason why I divested or disinvested, because I think it's a sort of an important general consideration, right? So diversification of your portfolio in any investment strategy is really important. Success in a market changes the diversification of your portfolio. So let me give the most extreme example of this. Suppose I had $100 in Kalshi and I bet $1 on Stephen A. Smith to become the Democratic presidential nominee. Okay.
All right.
Do you know who that is?
I do.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised by that.
I kind of like him.
Okay.
Okay. We
I
can
like
talk about that.
Stephen Smith too. Okay. So let's say I got myself $1 worth, 100 shares of Stephen A. Smith. And lo and behold, he wins New Hampshire and Iowa, and he's the clear front runner. And so now here we are in, I don't know, whatever, February of 2028. And my Stephen A shares have gone up 100-fold, right? So let's say Stephen A. Smith is now trading at 95 cents or something like that.
Right.
And I do think that there's still value there, but now let's say I put $10 on him. Okay, that'll make it easier. So now I have $950 in Stephen A. Smith, and the rest of my portfolio, I said I started with $100, was $90. So I have $950 of my $1,040 invested in Stephen A. Smith. So the success of the proposition has changed the diversity of my portfolio, right? Stephen A. Smith is now, 94% of my portfolio. And it wasn't the same thing here, right, as the shutdown bets, because I had bought the long on the shutdown, like the long 90 days
right,
at a very low price. So I had made a significant profit on it. And now, okay, so, throw fake numbers out there. Now, let's say I have $10,000 on that. Well, I wouldn't put half my portfolio on that bet, for example, right? So as it starts to constitute a bigger percentage of my portfolio, even if I think it continues to be a valuable proposition, I have to adjust. And so in the same way, and we're going to do perhaps next week, I think, like our best locks of the year. And you and I agree, Amir, what chance do you think there is that Trump is impeached during 2026? There's no chance.
Right.
Okay. But you could still get this at 87 cents, right? So that's a significant return. And so that's effectively a 16% return on your money plus the 3% Calci interest. That's 20%. I would be really happy to take my 401k savings and get 20% this year. That would be big money for me. Nevertheless,
it's even slightly more annualized, right? So it's great.
Nevertheless, I am not going to pull out all my 401k money and invest it in that proposition, just from a diversification standpoint. And in fact, and I know this is the same for you, we'll talk about locks. I look for different locks. And even though I think Trump impeachment is really close to as certainty as you're ever going to get in a market like this, much like will they seek to invalidate a Biden pardon, right? But I don't want to put all of my eggs in any basket. And actually, so we'll talk about that next time. But that was the main thing driving me, was that I was concerned that I was starting to have too high a percentage of my portfolio.
It's an exposure thing. So your probability estimate didn't really change, but what you were considering there is putting sort of a hard cap on overall exposure on any
Correct.
particular proposition.
And I bet,
right?
I think I mentioned this it didn't happen last week, but I put a fair amount of money that it wouldn't end by next Tuesday, which was a certainty. And actually, I have some money that it won't end by next Tuesday now,
Yeah.
because that's really not going to happen. But those are, low return 98, 99 cent propositions. But
Yeah. I think it's important for, people who are listening to understand this because, even if you're really convinced about a certain contract resolving in a way that's favorable to you, you might want to consider just putting a hard cap on exposure in total. So the way I approach this with my own portfolio is even if I think something is a lock to to the greatest extent that it can be, I won't put more than a third of my entire portfolio in a single proposition. Also, it's important to realize too that if you're moving across highly correlated contracts, the exposure on paper doesn't actually match the overall exposure because a series of interrelated events can lead to, contracts not resolving in your favor. So you should also look at correlated contracts.
So in investment, right, there's stocks that have betas which they move in sync with the market. And then oftentimes they're using, I think it's the alpha of a stock, which is it's the inverse of its relationship to the market, right? So it's a hedge. It's a hedge against market drops. And I think what you're saying is a very important thing. Putting the related propositions. So, for example, will Trump be impeached before 2028? And will the Democrats control the House in 2028? Are effectively the same propositions. So you really need to think about independence in these propositions. And to some extent, that'll inform our conversation about Iran, which is some of these propositions are really about, is this war going to end quickly? And then some are somewhat more independent of that. All right. Glad we had that conversation. All right. So I ran so far away. I ran all night and day. All right, Mike. So tell us how we got to where we are today, and then we'll talk about 5 or 6 markets in this space.
Sure. So let me just take you through like a high level overview of what's happened so far. So on February 28th, US and Israel launched a joint campaign in which they killed the supreme leader, Khomeini. And then that's followed by a period of about a week where we have a heavy bombardment and air campaign. Around the March 4th mark, you start to see regional spillover, including Hezbollah opening fire. And just recently, they put in a new supreme leader. I'm going to butcher the name. Mojtaba? Is that it?
Mojtaba.
Mojtaba. There we go. Thank you, Amir. And strikes have become expanded to more civilian infrastructure. So we're talking about desalination plants and things like that. And Trump has, for the second time now, demanded of Iran unconditional surrender. And then just one last sort of timeline related contract, the Strait of Hormuz contract, which was open for a while, whether or not it would be effectively closed. Well, that resolved, yes, a couple days ago. So things are not looking pretty in the Middle East.
Well, that's certainly going to drive, it drives real world price of oil, barrel futures, and it's also going to affect these markets.
Right.
Okay.
So when I'm thinking through the Iran contracts, which we're going to get through today, one of the ways I conceptualize this is sort of thinking in terms of levels of escalation, or in this case, reverse de-escalation. So right now we're at what I characterize as level 1. This is where, there are ongoing strikes. There seems to be no diplomacy on the table, whether it be formal or informal. The second level entails a ceasefire. This is when diplomacy might restart. I think this is possible in the near term. I'm not convinced it's likely. Then the third level would be regime structure changes, law and culture sort of materially moving toward Western values. And then finally, level 4 would be totally normalized Western democracy.
All right. So you have a continuum, and this continuum, level 1 is active conflict. Level 2 is effectively détente. Level 3 is peace, and level 4 is they become like us. Okay. All right.
Level 3 is peace with, liberal democracy thrown in. Yeah.
Does the United States satisfy level 3 right now?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We'll get to whether we're a democracy.
All right. So I think it's really important that when you're coming into something like this, approaching a bet or a series of bets that you have a core rationale for what you think is going to happen, what's going to happen. For example, we don't do sports very much, and I don't bet on sports very much, but I actually made a big bet on the Boston Celtics to win the NBA championship. They were trading at about 7 cents. And I was like, well, they're in second place in the East, and Jason Tatum is going to come back. They clearly have a greater than 7% chance and will be perceived as that. So that was my core rationale. Now Tatum is back, and I don't really have any strong core rationale to continue. So I'm probably just going to dump it at a certain point, right? I had a theory.
Your core rationale was the perception of market participants would change when Tatum got back. Right?
My core rationale actually was that they were underpriced because Tatum was going to come back. And I thought that I would be able to realize that in the short term. They didn't have to win the NBA championship for me to realize a return. Once he came back, the market was just going to reflect that extra chance. It wasn't really a bet on perception. It was about, okay. So if I'm approaching this, and this will ask you this question, I want to have a core sense before I'm going to invest about whether I think this conflict is going to last a long time or not. Okay. So you've got a level 1 through 4. How long's level 1 going to last? Okay. I mean, you're a Muslim. You can't have a conversation like this without having a Muslim in the room. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome here. You are welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You belong to an evil warmonger.
It's hard not to feel for those evil warmongers.
It's hard to feel for people.
Why have you attacked the United States? That's what I want to know.
Okay, so what's your
What's
your gut here about kind of the long-term arc of where this is heading?
I think so democracy in Iran is not happening.
Well, don't get into the specific markets yet. Just your gut about. So you're saying level 4 is not happening?
No chance.
Okay, and what about how long I'm sorry, that's response. And then how long? What's your gut about how long the conflict goes on for?
I think it depends entirely on, at this point, what Donald Trump does. And I think he's wanting to end this quickly because the midterm elections are coming up. This is going to be a major issue for both the Republicans and himself. And just the prices of everything, fuel, transportation, food is going to go up the longer this continues. The Iranians have shown that they're not willing to give up. For them, this is an existential crisis. And at this point, it's confirmed that it's just going to become just a conflict or a war of attrition.
Now, I hear you saying you think the U.S.'s resolve weakens.
Absolutely. And I think that's purely for a selfish reason for Trump, because he cares about his perception and he's demonstrated that in the past. And I think he'll want to do some kind of mini ground invasion at this point, call it a win, and then pull out.
Okay. Mike.
I understand where you're coming from, but I'm concerned that Trump will tactically, politically speaking, attempt to turn this into a basis for exercising broad emergency powers. I think that's something he's interested in doing. I also think that if there were to be, for instance, and there's been some reporting about this, a sleeper cell in Iran that successfully pulls off even a minor terrorist attack, that could play well, actually, to some of Trump's political and tactical goals. So I hear you on that point, but I just kind of wanted to push back, because when you said about a mini ground invasion, I don't think that's likely. I think that's going to, if Trump's worried about his perception, and I agree with you that he is, but he's also interested in police powers, he's not going to put boots on the ground.
Okay, I'm going to say I just think overall there's too much uncertainty here to really have any strong view about this. So I think the biggest problem here is that there's been no strategic objective that's been articulated, or there have been many strategic objectives that have been articulated at different times.
But many different people.
By many different people.
Yes.
Right. So if this was simply to disable Iran's nuclear capacity, by the way, if that were the objective, this could go on for a long time. It might require a ground invasion to do that. Okay. Second, I actually think there's mixed evidence on what the other thing you said, Amir, in terms of his political consequences, political considerations. I am not sure that Trump is overly concerned about the outcome of the midterm elections. Trump is already he's already kind of spun that in many ways. Party in power always does poorly in midterm. There's okay. I'm in the I don't know territory,
Yeah.
but I think there's a significant amount of evidence to say that Trump actually doesn't really care about the fate of the Republican Party. I
Fair
think
enough.
Trump just cares about himself. And, you know, I think if there were a face-saving way out of this, I mean, he's already declared victory. He's oddly said, we've already won. I don't
Mhm.
know what that means.
Nobody done.
Now he is going to face intense pressure from his business friends. I mean, the price of oil has already gone up dramatically. So you're going to start to see inflationary pressure. I mean, it's tough, but this guy is also like one of the most stubborn people that we've ever seen in our lives. Um, I don't feel confident about making a prediction. Although I do agree with you, level 4 is not going to happen. Right. And which we'll
get into.
well, actually, we can get into it right now. All right. So the first market we're going to talk about is whether Iran's going to become a democracy this year. Okay. So in your formulation, we need to get to level 4, right?
Right.
That to be the case.
So let me just take people through the contract a little bit. So the proposition is, will Iran become a democracy this year? But it's very important, obviously, to read the contract terms. So what makes this market, in my opinion, totally bettable and, as near to free money as you can get is the resolution mechanism. So the criterion that has to be met for Iran to be a democracy is that the Economist Intelligence Unit on Democracy has to publish an index score above a 6.0, which would indicate that it's a weak democracy. Right now, Iran's score is 1.9. It's ranked as 154 out of 167 in the world. There have only been 2 examples where this Economist index score has jumped by more than 3 points in history. And here we would need it to jump by more than 4 points. Okay. The composite of the score comes from a few different categories. So electoral processes could potentially increase somewhat, but you need to bridge a gulf, right? It also comes from the extent to which the government is functioning. This is liable to degrade as opposed to improve. Political participation, it's still a relatively low score that could potentially increase, but I still think it's liable to degrade. Um, Political culture and civil liberties are the last 2 categories. They're both ranked very low. For instance, like if freedom of speech or freedom of religion really took off in Iran, you could see a big bump in the civil liberties score. But anybody who's graduated the 8th grade social studies class probably knows that that's not liable to happen, right? Um, so that's why I'm looking at this market as a luck. And then just one other thing I'll say before I see what you guys think about this proposition. What we would have to believe for this market to resolve as yes, Iran will be a democracy, is that by the end of the year, it's going to have civil liberties, legal protections, electoral processes consistent with what goes on in Mexico and Moldova right now. And if you think of it in those terms, obviously Mexico and Moldova have their problems, but they're no Iran. And we would just have to see in the next 10 months a sea shift in what's.
So it's trading right now around 8 cents, right?
So it is trading
There's a
at
spread.
around 8 cents, but it's important for people to know that if they were to put in buy orders, they could probably get it at, you can get no at probably 84 to 88 cents.
Okay. So to bet a yes, you'd have to think, you'd be getting 12 to 13 to 1 on your money. So is there a 12 to 1 shot that Iran becomes a democracy by the end of 2026?
It's not happening.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna push lightly back on the free money proposition.
Sure.
There's risk inherent in anything, right? So, but okay, let's just say you could buy now. All right. I do think the price here matters. So I did buy in this market, and I got no shares at 84 cents. When we do our lock market next week, we could talk about the price that you demand. So if I were getting no's at 92 cents, I would not buy, because then I'm tying up my money for an 8 cent return over 10 months. So for me, I'm really interested in at least a 1% return over the month, and I'd prefer to get a 2% return over the. And actually, that's why some of these propositions, like, will the shutdown end by next week? If I could buy that at 99 cents, I don't mind a 1% return over a week. If I could get a 1% return every week, that's a 50% return over the course of the year, which I'd be the best investor in human history. So I would buy here, but it depends. Okay. This is my theoretical example of this. Like, let's say there was a market for would the world end by the end of the year.
Right.
Okay. So that is the theoretical lock, because I'm either going to win or I'm not going to care if I'm going to lose. Right.
Right.
Okay. But if you said to me, oh, I'll give you, you could buy the no on will the world end by the end of the year at 98 cents. I'm not going to buy that, because I could put my money in the bank and do better than that.
Right.
And I could certainly put my money in the stock market and do better than that. So it's not just about winning, right? It's about the return. So I think we've got 3 yeses here, though. I mean, there's no example of a Middle Eastern country rapidly becoming a civil libertarian democracy.
Right.
And I can't imagine a U.S. Invasion is going to be the impetus for that.
There's also like an internal mechanism here where Iranians are more nationalistic than ever. I mean, they didn't like the Ayatollah at all, but killing him and his entire extended family only made matters worse, even within the public. Like, you thought, Trump actually thought that he was going to see mass riots. He was encouraging people to hit the streets, and it's just not happening. And it's not only because Iran's cracking down on those kinds of things. It's just that people definitely want democracy, but they don't want it, this way.
I think it's really an important point, and it's, one of many respects in which it's clear that Trump personally, or the Trump administration, I don't know, seems like Trump personally, I don't know whether anybody in his orbit has said, really hasn't thought through the consequences of this decision. I mean, it's not as if, Iran was like, oh, thank God, and the Kurds all of a sudden came in and they're like, oh, we're seizing our opportunity. It's fine that we were all, mass executed in the past.
They forget there are thousands of years of history behind it.
They actually pulled out.
So the McDonald's is going to change all of that. It's really wild. I just wanted to say one more point on this before, I don't know, were you going to move on? So there's another way to play this market, just putting it out there because of what Amir had said. So if you were somebody who's betting on these propositions and you're convinced that a ceasefire and tentative diplomacy is about to restart in the next month or two, well, then it might not be a bad position to take a small yes position if you can put in buy orders at like 6 or 8%, because as the conflict moves through the levels I'm describing, the perception of the likelihood of these events is going to change, even though the likelihood is intrinsically 0. Iran is not going to become or 0.1. Iran is not going to become a democracy. So Amir, if you think that's what's going to happen, maybe put a late bet at 6 cents on yes.
So that's fair enough, but I
Do that
don't
today.
I don't like betting on irrationality.
I love doing that. So.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have Israel saying that they might use the Samson option, which is just like a tactical nuke in Iran, and that would just.
You said the Samsonite option?
Samson option. Oh, I think that's what they call it, and it would just destroy every bet that you have there.
Yeah.
Market 2, will the U.S. reopen its embassy in Iran by the? All right. So what needs to be true for this to happen?
Well, basically, you'd have to get up to, in my schema or whatever, level 3, right? So you would need significant structural changes to law and culture. You might be able to get there between levels 2 and 3, like with diplomacy and some intimation of structural changes. But I'm going to say you basically need to be at level 3.
This is what trading. This is trading at 18 cents. So it's about a 4-to-1 shot against the U.S. reopening its embassy?
Right. Well, it would be a huge symbolic concession. Just to frame it for people who might be unfamiliar. So we used to have a U.S. embassy in Iran that was closed after the Iranian Revolution and the taking of 52 American hostages. And we've severed direct diplomacy ever since those hostages have been returned. So we've had like a 50-year cold period.
Okay, Amir, you buying?
Absolutely.
Well,
The no position. Yeah.
would you buy the no?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's not happening.
Yeah, I'm also have to say, it's a little bit like our Musk conversation from a few weeks ago. There's really very, very little chance that the U.S. resumes normal diplomatic relations with Iran by the end of the year. So, actually, in some ways, significant move. Yeah, I think this might be a better proposition because you really need significant movement on for the U.S. to resume this. I mean, this feels to me like it belongs to somewhere between 50 to 1 and 100 to 1. Actually, it feels to me like it belongs more like between. So it should be around a cent, and it's 18 cents. Actually, all right, as soon as we're done taping, I gonna erase y'all. I'm sure that I don't release the episode until tomorrow morning so that I can get some money in. Yeah, this is not gonna happen. I mean, this isn't like returning diplomats to the country, or right. This is reopening the embassy,
and Iran would have to say yes to this too.
Of course,
So
Iran is not.
So I just read something briefly on a Kalshi newsletter that Iran has indicated some sympathy to reopening the embassy ultimately. So I think about that, and then I also think about, well, Trump would love to have this symbolic concession of reopening the embassy after 50 years.
Is it a symbolic concession?
Absolutely.
Oh, wait. On whose part?
On the Iranians' part.
Be on ours too,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, they bombed our.
You have to want to have the embassy there, right?
Oh, I understand what you're saying. I guess.
I mean, it's not a case of just expelling diplomats, which happens
often.
Right. I don't know. I could just, in Trump's sort of narrative, and I am speculating, of course, but in Trump's sort of narrative, I just think he would look at this as like such a, breakthrough watershed moment for the restoration of diplomatic relations. Look, they took the hostages, and now 50 years later, I'm Donald Trump, and I've reopened the embassy. I think it makes the Iranians look weak, and it makes him look strong.
The whole country, right? That's not really a diplomatic gesture.
No, it's not. I'm not arguing that, of course, is. He's not interested in diplomacy. He's interested in the symbolic effect that his perceived interest in diplomacy would have.
Okay, so you're going to buy a yes?
No.
I actually think it feels to me like this. I
wrote sub 5%.
I mean, this is not, I'm not sticking a third of my portfolio in here, but stick 0.5%.
Yeah, I think we're close to the same range. I would put this at 5% or less to happen.
Okay, well, even if it's at 5 cents and I can get it at,
right.
Even if there's a 5% chance and it's being treated like an 18% chance, there's value in the no.
Yes, there is.
All right. An Iranian-U.S. nuclear deal by the end of the year?
There's a few different markets.
Oh, this is before when? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Before April. Okay. Well, this one's really interesting, actually. So if I could get the no at 95 cents before April, that's a buy. There is no chance of a U.S. Nuclear deal, an Iranian nuclear deal by the end of the month.
There would have been. Okay.
I agree with that, but there's just no way that we're reversing from active war to signed deal within the next 3 weeks. Actually, that seems like a very generous return to me. But, so what are the more debatable propositions? Before August,
and before
that's trading at 27 cents, and before
2027
of the year at 38 cents. Right. What's your view on that?
My view is they're all all the no's are buys. I would buy before April at 95 cents most aggressively, before August second most aggressively, and before 27.
So which is more likely, a nuclear deal or we reopen an embassy in Iran?
I'd say nuclear deal.
A nuclear deal for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, it's possible to see the conflict ending with a nuclear deal and not having the embassy, but it's impossible to see the converse of that. It's impossible to imagine reopening the embassy without a nuclear deal.
Mhm.
There's just no way that the embassy reopens without a nuclear.
And it's up to the Iranians right now, actually, for the nuclear deal. Trump has signaled that he's willing to make, negotiate or restart negotiations.
Mm.
Now they're the ones who are saying, no, you want the
No, but
floor
it's
now.
clearly all the Iranians' fault.
Sure.
Well, that actually might be true.
Mm.
Okay. So I think we're all out on this.
Right. Yeah, nose a buy. What do you think, Amir? Would you buy the nose?
Yeah, but not I don't know about August, and I don't know about before 2027 either.
It could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's much more plausible than the embassy reopening. But it's not going to happen before April 1st.
Yes, for sure.
So this is March 12th. We're taping in this. We'll release it on March 13th. I mean, that's not bad for 2.5 weeks. All right. All right, Amir, you want to go through the who's likely to visit Iran by July?
Sure. So you have essentially Reza Pahlavi, whose father was the Shah, and Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, the House.
Benjamin Netanyahu's on the list.
BBB.
That has effectively zero chance of happening. But again, the price, you'd have to buy the no. It's at 7% to yes, no 95 cents. I mean that's a lock, but not a good price lock.
Right.
Okay, is there anybody in here? Who of these people do you think is, in absolute terms, the most likely to show us? I like this, that virtue of being a Muslim. You're the expert in that.
All of them, sure.
I don't know. This was a challenging one because it depends so much on what will happen in the next few weeks. And it's really, really difficult to say what will happen in the next few weeks.
So this market closes July 1st.
Right.
So you only need to be in for a couple of months here. My first thought about this is it's a good example of exposure across correlated contracts. So I just wanted to point that out because we mentioned it earlier. The people on the list are Rubio, Hegseth, any U.S. senator, any House member. So you can imagine a situation in which miraculously a delegation goes, right? And so you've sort of really exposed yourself across highly correlated contracts. So I was in on no for all of these early. I bought Rubio at no at 76 cents heavily.
Well, I don't think these are perfectly correlated. Hegseth is different. You do have instances where
They're not perfectly.
the Secretary of heretofore Defense or Chairman of the Chief Staffs, or even sometimes the President has showed up at a battleground just to, boost the morale of the troops. And if anybody were going to do a stunt like that, Hegseth seems like the one to do it. I mean, you get some viral video content out of it. I don't think it's inconceivable that he shows up there.
Where would they show up, though? That's the question.
I mean, I'd have to see what's the definition. I'll look at the definition of visit.
Visit? They have to physically be present. They can't be in the airspace or anything like that.
I mean, he's not going to walk around Baghdad.
Right.
Baghdad's
flying over without landing, airport layovers do not count as visits.
Right. I just don't see a way that Iran would allow this.
There were huge security threats too, right? I mean, even if you're the most powerful country in the world, if you go into another country that's reasonably developed with missiles, you could die easily, right? So
called it a battleground, but it's not one yet.
It'd be very dangerous.
Right.
So the correlated markets here are when you were saying about like a diplomatic delegation. Rubio and Kushner are very related propositions. Vance is effectively the same proposition. I don't know why there'd be a spread between Rubio and Vance. That doesn't actually make sense to me. When you get any U.S. senator or any U.S. House member, you have the possibility of a renegade. Chris Murphy goes off. Chris Murphy ain't going to. He's not out of his mind. I mean, so it's a slightly different proposition, but it's very, very hard for me to imagine. Hegseth is the only 1 year. I mean, if you said to me, I'm giving you $1, if I had to pick among Rubio, Hegseth, Netanyahu, Vance, I would pick Hegseth, though I think I would be throwing the dollar away.
Right.
Now, Pahlavi, that's also hard to see.
That's the actual stunt. So he would do that to kind of.
What would need to be true for him to be able to visit without fear of being dead immediately?
First of all, he needs to full support of the U.S. He can't do it on his own.
Right.
He should die.
And then Iran, no military assets in Iran at all at any given time. That
You don't think there's any chance that like the present leadership could moderate to the extent that he would?
Well, actually, the people of Iran hate Pahlavi.
Right.
It's really only just.
Do you think elites would potentially defect toward him or no?
Which elites? The Iranians?
Yeah.
No.
Got
Most of the Iranian elites are actually for the theocracy.
Right.
Right. So the people hate him. Theocracy obviously hates him. Nobody likes Pahlavi other than the diaspora that lives in the United States.
Got it.
All right. Do you want to talk about U.S. gas prices, Mike?
I don't, but maybe Amir does.
I don't know. Before today, I was going to have an opinion on it, but then suddenly diesel stabilized in price, and I don't know where that's coming from.
Well, it's coming from projections of release of strategic reserves.
Yeah, they're having the biggest release ever.
But I thought we were critically low on our.
No, the strategic reserve is massive amount. I just feel like, okay, I wouldn't bet in this market for a variety of reasons. I really don't love those band markets where it's, is the price going to be between $100 and $110, $110 to $120?
Okay.
I have to have a theory of the case there if I'm going to do that. So either I'm betting the whole high end or the whole low end. But I don't know. This just seems like so volatile. I mean, I'm here to make a series of 5% gains over months.
Right.
I'm not going to piss this away on guessing what the price of oil is going to be. All right. You did want to say, Amir, you have a view on whether there's a market for whether he'll be the next leader of Iran?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, he is. You're saying you said it. No,
it's
everybody's going to sue you if you don't.
It's your first episode. You've already.
So the chance he's trading at 16 cents, you can get the no at 85 cents, and you want to explain to everybody why it's not going to happen.
He'd be beheaded.
In what?
He'd be beheaded the moment that he's that. You have to remember, I mean, his father was exiled, right? And kicked out of Iran. Once again, nobody likes him in Iran or even in the Middle East.
It must be somebody. He must have like some family.
Like 3 followers.
Yeah. It's got to be his uncle.
It's honestly mostly American in the United States that really support him. And even then, it's just a tiny, on this. On the no position, yes.
Yeah. More confident about him not being the next leader of Iran than the U.S. not opening its embassy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I can't see a universe in which this happens. I mean, the only thing you could really hope for, I mean, what Trump keeps talking about is he's hoping for some, like the Venezuela model where he gets, a member of the existing government who he perceives as moderately beholden to him, or at least amenable to working with the United States, but is not going to throw oil on the oil fire.
The problem is Iran's government
is throw oil on the oil fire.
No, that's good. That's good.
It's a very decentralized government, right? So everybody thought, oh, they're going to kill the Ayatollah, and then it's just going to destabilize everything in Iran. It didn't at all.
Of course not.
I mean, the higher GCs, like they had, years long planning for this, and they knew this was going to happen. In fact, there are reports saying that he specifically positioned himself there to be martyred, and it worked. It worked exactly how he wanted.
Okay. So actually, if you're with us for our lock discussion, it'd be interesting if you nominate this one. No, it's the way my brain goes with this is, okay, so him at 85 cents. So like a lot of my nominees, and we can do this, You're welcome to join. We can each come up with our top 5 locks, right? And, a lot of my lots are priced at 85 cents. And effectively, what I'm doing is I'm putting out limit orders to try to get what I perceive to be a lock at 83 or 84 cents. And now as we progress through the year, right, and time passes, then you're getting less of a return is available to you. So I'm trying to think, would I bet the no on Pahlavi or not being impeached? It really, really is impossible for me to imagine Trump being impeached in 2026. Guess I can write a sci-fi novel in which because they're both pretty close to clear nose. Actually, the embassy, though, get that at 82 cents. That might be a takeaway. All right. Well, I will say I am already in on Iran not becoming a democracy. But that I got a good price on that, and it will not be a nuclear deal by the end of March.
Okay. Makes sense to me. Certainly not by the end of March. Probably not this year, but we'll see.
All right. Amir, thanks for joining. You can return to your hovel now. Bye.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Amir.
All right.
All right.
Do well with them. Universal Basic Calci Guys was created and is hosted by Michael Horahan and Evan Mandery. Our producer is Amir Rasulov. Our theme song is Passing Trains by Nathan Eklund. You can follow us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram at UBK Guys, or email us at admin@ubkguys.com. The content on Universal Basic Calci Guys is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute trading, financial, or investment advice. Nothing discussed on this show should be construed as a recommendation to buy or sell contracts on any prediction market. Trading on prediction markets involves real financial risk, and you could lose money. Always do your own research and consider your own financial situation before trading. The hosts may and often do hold positions in markets discussed on the show. Views expressed by guests are their own and do not reflect the positions of the show or its hosts. If you or someone you know is struggling with problem gambling, free and confidential help is available 24/7 through the National Problem Gambling Helpline at 1-800-522-4700 or visit ncpgambling.org.